Okay, let's take a look at where we left off last time. We have a settings window. I can close my settings window. It brings my game title back. What I'd like to do is create a button. So I'm going to go to UI and essentially create a button. And this is the button that's going to start our game. So let's just make it twice as big. And I'm going to press W inside this view and just move the button below our game title. You know, this is a pretty important button. Let's make it like 3 times the size. There we go. And we're going to call this start button. And I'm going to change the text inside of this button to start underscore text. Now, the thing to notice, and let's actually just change the text here to start. What we're going to do is um, so we're learning about user experience design essentially through this series, right? So we're sort of designing a menu. We learned how to turn the volume on and off, all that good stuff for a game. So I think a good place to start is by starting to recreate classic video games is to really design games for user experience. And one concept is just called symmetry. And it's creating games that provide the same level of difficulty for both players. And it's like two-player games and you're starting off with the same odds, the same everything. And the best game I think to start with is Pong. So let's go back into our game title here. So in our canvas, there's title. So I'm going to rename this to Pong, exclamation point. And what we'll do above our canvas here is we're going to create a empty game object, and we're going to call this assets. And we're going to place all of our assets, which essentially is really all of our game stuff. So, for instance, in here, I might want to um, let's create some of our game assets. So I'm going to go to game object, 3D object, and I'm going to make a cube. And in this cube here, let's go off of 2D mode for a second. I'm just going to reset. This might be really big, actually, all this text. Let's see, 222. And then let's reset its position, 000. There we go. Okay, that's our cube. Okay, so there's our cube. And let's find our main camera here. So here's our main camera. I'm going to hit F to focus. So notice that it's pretty different between if I double click canvas and it shows me my canvas here. And they do that more of a design thing. So here's my cube. I'm going to make it a child of the asset. And I'm going to name this player underscore paddle. And I'm going to hit F to focus. And I'm just going to move this off to the side here. And with that, I'm just going to hide this canvas. And what I'd like to do is make the game look almost like 2D, but it's really 3D. So let's select our main camera here. And we're going to change it from perspective to orthographic. Now that shouldn't mess up my canvas because it's already in orthographic view, which means that it's this flat view. And so what I can do now is I can select my player paddle and I can just kind of scale it like this. And I want to make sure that our paddle, so if we look at the position, here's our X position, right? And then here's our Y. Really, the Z, we want to keep that at 0. And the reason for that is because we're going to be creating our ball and everything inside of this, essentially the structure. So here's my player paddle. I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate that. And I'm going to call this, let's do this as player 1 and player 2. Now, player 2's paddle, we can do it as we can do it where we control it. We could also do it as like some form of AI, and maybe we'll script that too. So here's our assets. And then what I'd like to do is turn the assets on and then turn everything else off once we start our game. Okay, so here's our start button. And really, we could have this as a separate canvas to do this. But let's go ahead and do this, turn this around. So I'm going to go ahead and hit plus on here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab my assets here and drop them in here. What I'd like to do, because remember this is inactive at this point, is on my assets here, I would like to uh, go to function here and then game object, and I want to do let's see, hold on a second. Let's see, game object, and then we want to set this active. And here's our Boolean. Now I'm going to check this on. So what that means is when I click this, it's going to turn on the active when I click the start button. So let's test this out. So when I hit start, you can see, boom, there's our paddles. And we'll create a simple um, background here. Now, I think in the previous video also, one other thing that I forgot to mention is on my main camera here, under environment, I changed it from skybox to solid color, and then I think I went with a green color. You have to forgive me. I'm kind of working with two different projects here. One, which was this one, which sort of crashed at one point. So, but everything should be, it's all the same essentially. It's not really going to slow you down. So anyway, I hit start. You can see there's our two paddles. And we'll create a material for these paddles too, so they stand out a little bit and they're not just gray. But for now, that works. But also, when I click the start button here, I want to hide my entire canvas. So I'm going to add another button here. I'm going to grab my entire canvas. And then under no function here, I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to go to game object and then just set active. And I want to turn this off. So now when I press play and I hit start, you can see everything is hidden except for these two paddles. So that's a pretty good start. So let's go ahead and turn these assets on and let's turn off our canvas for a second. And let's just create basically just the setup for our system. So this is 0, this is 0. I'm going to go to game object, 3D object, and I'm going to create a sphere. And the sphere is going to be at 0 as well. So it's on the Z axis. And actually, it looks like we need to, these are at 0. Oh, the reason for that is this needs to be under this assets thing. So now when I click my sphere here and I set this to 0, it should because it's all dependent on where this empty game object is. So here's our ball, and I want to make sure as the ball travels, it actually will hit these paddles. So I'm just kind of moving it over to check. Looks good, and we know on the x-axis, if we hit 0 here, it takes it off. So we want to go ahead and I'm gonna just check the distance. So this is like minus 562. Actually, you know what we can do is select all three of these and the camera. So I'm my camera is at 0. This asset's here. So the center point here is 0. Okay, let's try this. Let's see. If we select our assets here and we set it to 0, I think it's going to shoot us all the way over somewhere else. Where is it taking us to? I'm going to hit F to focus. It takes us all the way over here. So let's undo that. Our main camera, let's see, is set here. I think for now, we'll just leave it as is. What's going on is anytime you make something a child, which means you drag it on there, it copies the parent's transform. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to create an empty game object again. And notice this new empty game object we created is at 0 here. So I'm going to grab all three of these elements. I'm going to drop them on this empty game object, and I'm going to delete this other assets thing. So now with this new game object here, you can see that's set to 0, and it's because of the original positioning. So I'm going to name this one assets holder underscore holder. All right, so let's go ahead and just briefly, let's move all three of these up a little bit so they're centered a little bit more. And let's go to game object and 3D object. And I'm going to make a cube. And I'm going to name this top wall. Top underscore wall. And I'm going to just kind of move this forward a little bit here. And on top, and I'm going to hit R. Again, just sort of making sure you can see that's going to stop it there. And I'm just going the length of that 16 by 9. So I'll move it down just a little bit here so we can see it in that view. So we got one here. I'm going to hit Control D, move that down. And I'm going to name this one bottom. We could just even just speed this up and do B wall. And then I'm going to do Control D, hit R, Scale that in and up. And we'll call this right wall. And then Control D and name this one left wall. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. And then in the next video, we'll start writing the code to move our paddle.